right, you're good to go, Scott.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to call the Waldoboro Planning Board meeting to order September 9th, 2021. We have a quorum of Jim, Johnny, myself, and new member Sarah Rich. And we have Max Johnstone, Town Planner, and Susan Alexander, our Trustee Secretary. So we have a quorum. And I'd first like to welcome Sarah, welcome you to the Planning Board. We appreciate your joining very much. And hopefully, I like to allow new members or give new members an opportunity to tell us a little bit about themselves. I'll hold off on that for the minute because I usually like other board members to also, so you get to know us a little bit. But I wanted to just check in with Max. So I think without Barbara or Jeff, we can't approve the minutes that we have. I don't think we have enough members that were present for those meetings. And the other major thing on the agenda that I'm aware of is talking about the land use ordinance changes. Was there anything else we needed to cover tonight?
The only other thing is the submission checklist that I sent to everyone via email.
Yep.
I know that was something that the planning board had used in the past, and this was just a revised version. I want to try and get us back to that pattern of checklist when going through applicants.
Yep.
So are these items all here, and then
okay,
it can be officially done.
Did you want to do that before or after the LUO modifications?
If it's all right, I would like to go through the amendments first, just because we didn't finish them up last time, and there were some things I wanted to discuss or some changes.
Sure. Okay.
Should I start just back where we left off last time, or should I start from the beginning since there have been some changes to the other areas?
I think we should start from the beginning, especially with Sarah here. I think that would be helpful. But before we go there, why don't we just take a minute while Jim is still here too as well, just to talk to Sarah a little bit. Rather than put you right on the spot, Sarah, I usually like to have the board members also tell you a little bit about themselves. And since I'm imposing this on everyone, I will start. I had a career in research and development in sort of high performance materials area, and I was involved with joint venture work in Japan and businesses in China and Korea. So ended up with quite a bit of Asia travel at the end of my career. My wife and I were part-timers in Waldoboro since 2002. And when we both retired in 2015, we moved here full-time, and we started growing elderberry and aronia and raspberry. So we had sort of have a healthy berry farm that is keeping us busy, especially in the summer season when we also have a lot of company. So that's my background. Jim, you want to tell Sarah a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, listen to your synopsis. It's amazing the parallels between our careers. I've also lived and worked around the world in the oil and gas business, though. 9 years in Holland, 2 years in Paris, 4 years in China, a year in Portugal, too many years in Houston, which is another foreign country, and a bit of Michigan and Tennessee, and built oil refineries, chemical plants, a solar grade polysilicon plant in Tennessee. It's great big projects. Retired also in 2017, but Susie moved here in 2015 into our retirement home. But we've been part-time residents since 2000. So live right down the road on Dutch Neck from Scott.
Thanks, Jim. Johnny?
Yes, every time I do this, I always feel like I'm being too boastful. And I can hear my mother say, son, always have humility. But here goes. 35 years in the healthcare industry. I'm a registered respiratory therapist. Spent 20 years at Maine Medical dealing with critical patients in all areas. I'm now at Miles. I'm going on my 28th year. Been going right through this COVID crisis. I've just finished my 7th book. I'm an author, and I am currently a 2-time world champion in powerlifting.
Wow.
So that is impressive. So Sarah, tell us about yourself.
Well, should Susan go?
Oh, Susan, go ahead, please.
I have been the secretary of the Waldoboro Planning Board since about 1980, I think. If that doesn't add up to 35 years, it's a long time. It's the longest consecutive that I've worked for any group. I was very pleased to be asked. At that time, I was working at Rockport Town Office. I was taking minutes of select board meetings and planning board meetings and comprehensive plan revision. And the 2 town managers got together and they discovered that I lived in Waldoboro and decided that they would ask me to take minutes of the Waldoboro Planning Board. I have also briefly taken minutes of the select board, but I'm no longer doing that now that we have a new town clerk who has taken over that responsibility. But
Susan, where did you get your incredible knowledge of editorial requirements and
editorial requirements,
punctuation?
I should start by saying I do not have a secretarial background. I was in the college prep division in high school. I went to Mount Holyoke College and have a 4-year degree from there and a year of graduate work in geology. My first full-time job was at Chesapeake Bay Institute, where I edited technical reports and papers for the faculty. And there they asked me to take minutes of faculty meetings because they couldn't remember what they had decided, or they couldn't agree on what they had decided, and they figured they better have somebody write down what they had decided. And so that was the start of my long career as a minute taker, although I have no special ability in that regard. As I say, I don't have shorthand or even speed writing. I just write as fast as I can and do the minutes as promptly as I can while I still have a recollection of what my notes mean and the scrawls on the paper. It's now easier when there are Zoom recordings and I can go back and check things. But it's a pleasure to work with you all, and it's been very rewarding for me.
Probably.
Max, why don't you go?
Hi, Sarah. It's me, Max.
Hi.
I started in working for the town as the planner back in 2017. Before then, I was in college up in Ottawa, Canada. And that's pretty much the extent of my whole thing.
Are you Canadian or you have bi-citizenship?
Dual citizenship, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
I was born in the States.
But Canada gave you
Yeah. My mother is from Montreal. She's actually going up to Canada this weekend to test out that whole thing because we're worried there's going to be another border shutdown soon with all the numbers going up. So she wants to go up and see her family now while there's still that little window.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Oh, hopefully it works out.
Okay, Sarah, your turn.
Yeah, so I moved to Waldoboro in December with my partner. We are at Tall Tree Farm, which is right next to Lakin's Gorgeous Cheeses on 20. So we are a vegetable market farm, and we have a garden, and we've been selling vegetables at the market next door on Monday afternoons. And my day job is I'm a data scientist for a company that is a listings business for used cars. And I've worked at a couple of different tech companies before that. And before that, I spent pretty much my whole 20s in graduate school for math and computer science. So,
I got a question for you.
yeah.
I got a leased car and I got to figure out what to do with it in 3 months. But used cars, there's no used cars, the guy said. He said,
Yeah, they'll give you a lot of money for it, but they won't give you a new car to lease. So it's kind of, you're in a tough spot.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have any great advice there, but but I mean, I would probably try to hang on to the car that you have if I were you.
Yeah, that's what I'm leaning towards.
Where did you go to school, Sarah?
I went to the University of Texas at Austin for math, and then I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for computer science.
Did you like Austin? I've only been there once a long time ago.
I did. I mean, I was in graduate school at the beginning of graduate school for math at the time, so I didn't really get to enjoy it as much as I would have maybe if I had a little more free time. But it seemed like a really cool place. I spent most of my time in various buildings on campus, but
yeah. I know that feeling. I went to school in New York City and I had no money, and yeah, anyway, great. Well, thank you. Welcome to the board. And if you have any questions or, it's a learning process, and don't worry and ask as many questions as you want, and we'll go from there. So Max, why don't we start in on the LUO amendments?
Yes, so I believe I sent out last week via email the land use ordinance amendment suggestions to be reviewed on September 9th, 2021. Just to get Sarah up to speed, the town did amend the land use ordinance last year. It was the bigger overhaul. But a lot of the suggestions that I made are somewhat minor. And
Hey, Max, I think your vocal volume just went away right after you started talking.
I agree.
Can't hear me any? You can't hear me?
Now,
or anything?
now it's good.
Oh, let me grab a different mic. Okay.
Oh, well, then it was good. But when you leaned down to look at your paper, I think is when we lost you.
Now we've got two mics that should work.
All right. Hopefully this will work. How does this
That's
sound?
good.
All
That's
right.
perfect.
Well, so the town amended the land use ordinance back in 2020, and the changes that I have at least brought up recently, they're supposed to address some items that have only come up very recently, like 2021 recently. These are by no means items that we have to approve. These are things I wanted the planning board to look at and consider making changes to for better clarification. So I will go through each one and I'll say what items have been changed since the last meeting and why. So the first is amend the following sections on page 3-2. So section 3.3.4, last month it would have read, a condition may not be imposed to regulate an item not specifically addressed in this ordinance. The language that would have been added, nor an item that is outside the scope of the proposal. That last segment, I'm suggesting we can actually remove, because when I've talked with MMA, they said that we don't really want to overword some of these items.
Mm-hmm.
And so for conditions of approval, if we feel that the original language already meets the intention, then we don't have to really go overboard with adding that additional segment for not including items outside the scope of the proposal. I remember last meeting, that was something we kept having a bit of a discussion on, well, what's considered outside the scope of proposal. So we can remove that segment if we feel it's overwording it.
Right, but I just want to clarify here. So the red is different from what you had recommended in July.
Correct.
What's the change? So what now, if we take that red section out, what is changing? What change is being made to that section?
The section would just remain as it is written right now. The only reason I had it in red is because if you're looking at this compared to the last notes that I gave out,
Yeah,
the difference is I'm removing that and I'm leaving that note.
okay. So basically, we're not changing anything, correct?
Not with the new suggestion that I have.
Okay, okay.
Section 3.3.5.
So I'm fine with that. So if the rest of the board is fine with that, we don't have to, you can leave this off, right, Max?
Right.
Next
I
time.
won't include it. I won't include it next time.
Okay. I'm fine with it. Jim, John,
Yeah,
Sarah, you
yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
I
good.
don't see any reason to change it. Okay, next section.
Section 3.3.5, permit issued after municipal review. There is no change from the last reviews, so we would add in the following sentence: municipal approval does not exempt the applicant from other regulatory bodies or private agreements. So there's no change to this one from what I had last meeting.
Okay,
So next, amend the following section on page 3-3.
wait a minute, Jim, were you gonna say something, Jim?
No, I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just
I
think
figure- I
before you
figure
move
we'll-
on, we want to make sure we're all fine with these sections. We're just, if somebody has a, yeah, please chime in if you've got any question or you want to change any of these from.
By exception.
Okay,
I take it that the second sentence of section 3.3.5 is new material that's added that we're supposed to approve tonight. Is that correct?
Well, we wouldn't be approving it, but yeah, this is more of, are there any suggestions to changing the language that I have suggested?
Okay.
So moving on,
please.
page 3-3, section 3.4, public hearing requirements. The red language would allow us to, would change it to language that we discussed last meeting. So this would read, for applications that require using private roads, a notice must be sent out to the relevant road association. If there is no road association, then a letter must be sent to each property owner, aka resident, that benefits from the private road. That's what the language would read based on comments from last meeting.
Max, when you say relevant, there's some room for interpretation, isn't there? I mean, what do you mean by relevant? What if there was 2 or 3 groups that felt they were relevant?
Well,
I mean, that's just, it just
Right.
looks like it's a little bit where you could run with it in a different way.
well, the intent is, with what we just experienced with Controversy Lane and the solar farm, there was no road association at the time, but if there was, it would be that road association for that immediate area. I don't know.
For that, that's relevant. It's
Right.
Okay.
I don't, and we'd want to make sure that a road association that's maybe a mile away from the area isn't the one who has to get
Okay.
the notice.
Okay. Relevant. Okay.
But does anyone have any other thoughts on that language?
Is there anything to guarantee that the road association would be representing the residents? Like, if the business in question forms an association, are they what's their obligation to inform residents? How do we make sure we're still communicating with the people that live there?
So as part of the public hearing process, the town office has to send out letters and notices to the abutters of the property. So for how this language, so the inclusion of this language would say, not only do the abutting property owners get a notice, but the lead or the road association would be receiving a letter in the mail as well.
Oh, so this isn't in lieu of notifying the abutters, it's in addition to, okay.
Right.
In addition to.
Yeah.
In lieu of- in
So,
addition to.
right. And if there is no road association, then a letter would be sent to each person who does use that private road. So for example,
Even
we-
if person.
So for example, we had an application on Apple Barn Lane where there was no road association. So with this language, I would have sent out a letter to each person who actually uses the Apple Barn Lane road. But if there was a road association, it would go to whoever that officer is for that road association,
As well as the abutter.
as well as the abutters of the property, yes.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So it sounds like the abutters will always be notified, but if there is a road association, the communication will just be with the road association. And so, no.
And the abutters, yes.
And the abutters, but like in the controversy lane case, it would just be with the road association and the people whose property directly abut the project. It wouldn't be with the other residents on controversy lane.
Right,
Correct.
but since there wasn't, this would retroactively, this is just sort of mandate what we've realized is important for us to do. In the controversy lane case, there's a lot of side roads and all those people have to use controversy lane and they had no road association. So this mandates that all those people that use it would get notified whether they had a road association or not.
What do you do about renters? Suppose I'm renting a house on the road and I don't own that house, would I get a notice? Or should I get a notice?
I send letters out to the owner of, it goes to the person who owns the property. So I look at the tax card and I send it to the mailing address that's on the tax card.
Thank
If it
you.
says, if it gives a second owner / second address, then I send it to that as well.
So that helps, Sarah. For example, there are people that their actual permanent address is, if they're part-timers, they might have their own property here, but they might live somewhere else. That address would be on the tax card, so they would still get notified as an abutter, even if their permanent resident isn't on that property.
Yeah, no, I that makes sense. I was wondering, I guess, we don't need to spend a lot more time on this, but just if the road association is not under any obligation, presumably, to notify anybody. So if we notify the road association, that's not really as rigorous as notifying all the people who use the road,
Right.
or we have reason to believe use the road.
Yeah, that is, so it is possible. So I guess I view this as an upgrade over what we had because we didn't have any requirement to send to anyone. If the road association is doing a bad job, or the management of the road association, you're right, that's a potential issue. One would hope that they would be doing their due diligence in this case. But
And the
that is
road,
something we're thinking about.
well, the road association traditionally is supposed to be sort of a mini elected group of people who represent the road. For example, on controversy, we're going to keep using controversy as an example. They just elected their own officers. So I now have that communication with the officers of when I learn something about when documents are prepared or when construction is going to begin, who is the singular person I can send this to, and they'll be able to make sure it gets to everyone who's on that road. That is the role and should be the role of the road association for that type of communication. If they fail, it is very unfortunate beyond just the town's notices.
Is there any like description in place of what a road association is and like what it is supposed to do?
Well, there is a state the state
Okay.
has a sort, and in fact, in the controversy lane case, there was a mandatory state system for creating a road association that we required the applicant to participate in. So,
Okay, all right. Sorry for all the questions.
no, no, no.
Oh, no,
good.
no.
Oh,
It's good to ask the question.
You're drinking from a fire hose now, Sarah. I mean, there's lots of.
I've still got a question, Scott. If the word resident is there, it seems to me that renters of property on that road are residents of that road. But you've told me that renters do not get that notice. So is the word resident
Property owner.
wrong? Should that be deleted or? Think about that a little more, perhaps.
A property owner / resident. Or perhaps just get rid of residents in general, I'd say.
Well, I like the property owner. I think / resident makes sense.
We added in the word resident last time to get the other folks that live in the neighborhood that weren't abutters. That was the intent.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's / is fine. I don't think striking it is. And I think, yeah, and I would not, I mean, I think it really is the property owners and not the renters anyway, so.
And just for my own personal thing, I'll amend the notices that do go out to the property owners and make a little bit saying, if you rent out the property, please notify the renter. That could be more on my end, for what the notices say. So that final segment would read, then a letter must be sent to each property owner / resident that benefits from the private road. Any thoughts?
yeah, that's better.
Works for me.
Jim, Sarah?
Yep, fine.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to section 3.5. Again, this is a correction based on comments from the last meeting. Failure of an abutter / resident to receive notice shall not invalidate the public hearing, nor shall it require the board to schedule a new public hearing.
Failure of an abutter or the resident or the owner, or I mean, what if someone says, for whatever reason, every effort was made and they didn't get it, they didn't get notice, and then could they come back and say, I didn't have a chance to voice my concerns?
That's what this actually refers to.
So they would they have any recourse to get what they wanted to say in the records?
After the record, yes, but it wouldn't have an impact
Okay.
on the overall
So it'd
application.
be after the fact.
Like I make my summaries
Yeah.
that describe, or what is it called? The conclusion statement,
Yeah.
where I pretty much say, this is how the vote went. These were the public comments. So if there is someone who comes after the meeting and
Right.
says, this is what I wanted to say,
Okay.
I'll include that in the record.
Like an addenda of sorts.
Right.
But it doesn't, the whole point is that it doesn't invalidate the meeting or any votes that are taken.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
In terms of the language, an abutter / resident is the language. And that was to address the new language that we put under section 3.4 for the public hearing.
Okay, next, I think. I don't see any.
Anyone else?
Nope.
All right. So page 6-19, this was regarding the setback lines for private roads as opposed to public roads. Based on the impression that I was getting from everyone, this might be a bigger item than what I initially thought this would be. So what I would like to do is just scrap the language that I proposed last time, and perhaps there's going to be a better solution down the road. So I'm suggesting to scrap section 6.9.8, which would have reduced the private setback which would have reduced the setbacks for a private road from, say, 75 in the residential area to 30 instead. And the only reason I'm suggesting tabling that for now is because it seemed like a bit of a big issue. And I don't know if we want to try and talk about it now, or if we want to try and solve it in a different area.
Well, let me just clarify here for myself that right now, there's no specific separate setbacks for private roads in the ordinance. Is that correct? I don't remember any, but that doesn't.
Correct. From what
Correct.
MMA informed me, because we don't specifically say private roads are different from public roads, if someone was to build their home off of a private road, they would have to follow the same setbacks that we do have for the public roads, which in this case would be
Bless you.
75 feet from the edge. Bless you.
So it's simply that in the past, there was
An unofficial precedent that was being done by.
that was allowed for
Yeah.
private developments, not necessarily through the planning board, but
Right.
through the code enforcement officer. So if we do nothing, we're not changing the land use ordinance. So we would only be, if we change it, it's to codify and to add some language to decide if we want to allow different setbacks for private roads. And our
Right.
discussion was that, I think my recollection is that there were some members that wanted to impose the full setbacks on private roads. And I myself was a little bit more amenable to considering it being different, but I think that is a big discussion. Perhaps it's something we should think about carefully as well. So maybe we don't want to do it now.
Right.
But we may want to do it before these actually go to before we fully approve these to go to the select board, before it goes to the town for approval.
Mhm.
We have to think about that.
I thought last time we were going to try to reach out to more people and try to get a better consensus of what the community thought about this.
And that might be, well, one of the new other items I want to talk about was also the dimensional standards in general, which talk about setbacks. So depending on that, it might answer it. But when I spoke with Stan Waltz about this, the code enforcement officer, a lot of the private roads many of them were private residential subdivisions that were made at a time when the setbacks weren't created. So it creates somewhat of an issue for them to have new construction done. But it might be something where we just have to reach out to more people in the town and get their thoughts on this. Because last time there were two good points on both sides of the matter. One of it's a private road, whereas the other was it's still a road that should meet the standards and still has to get the building permit done anyways.
Mhm.
So this was just a bigger item that might be better to be handled at a different time, since the purpose of this amendment section of these amendments were more technical and to address some of the bigger items that are coming from the state and from local observations.
What's Stan's current practice?
Oh, what do you mean?
What does he approve?
He's been,
Is he following the precedent that John Black did? Using
yes,
the 30-foot?
yes.
Then I think we really want to address this sooner rather than later.
Okay. So I'll make a note that we'll come back on that one. So if it's all right, we can come back. If I would like to probably come back to this after going through the items again, just because there's still a bit to talk about.
Mhm.
And I may need some more time to work on this item for the road setback item.
Okay,
And I fully agree with that, Max. I don't want to try to do it tonight, but I
Oh,
don't
no.
want to let it drift, for another year. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's something that we need to address.
No,
After we've collected more input from other people and
Right.
yeah, just do some data gathering.
I was gonna say, this is something where I probably just need to do some research on how other towns deal with private roads. Speak with them about that.
Yep.
Based from because if my discussion from MMA was an indicator, other towns do have some different standards for a private road. So that might be sort of homework for myself to see what other towns do with it. And it might be based on the size of the road. For example, a private road that serves 3 residents might be completely different from a private road that serves 10 or more people. So that I can do as homework and have ready for next time.
Thank you.
great, thanks.
So next was
I think you can skip the numbering thing.
yes, I can skip the numbering thing. Oh, actually, the thing I will point out for the signs is I believe there was actually a misnumbering on that one at 7.10.3.3.10. That actually should be a sub of one of the requirements. So I'm gonna have to probably renumber the sign items.
Okay,
Page 7-12. Section 7-12. Again, this is just amending the last segment. All applicants will speak with the Waldeboro Fire Chief for the following items. The Waldeboro Fire Chief will make recommendations for each item under this section at their discretion, which the municipal authority may choose to accept or deny. And that was based on comments from last meeting. Thoughts?
Fine.
Give an example of that, Max. I'm just a little turned around on that. What exactly would be an example of that?
So what the fire chief is required to do is say that he has access to water, or if he doesn't, what the applicant should do.
Right.
And same thing with the fire, with the lockbox that's been recently added. So, for example, if someone's just changing the use to an office,
Right.
or it's a home business, the fire chief may say, well, you live there, you don't need a lockbox.
Okay.
But the board could turn around and say, well, it's a home business and you live there, but if you're on vacation, you operate a little forge area, you probably should have a lockbox just in case. And so the board may choose to still require a lockbox.
Right. So just so we're clear, the chief can say, give a waiver, but the board can overrule it?
Yes,
Is that, okay. That's what
because the board has the overall authority on the matter.
I see.
why does it say municipal authority rather than planning board then? Or is this something that others in the town office, like the select board, could impose?
Because this could be the planning board, the code enforcement officer, or
Okay,
the code enforcement officer and myself.
okay, great. Okay,
Any other comments? All right. Next, amend the following on page 9-8. That one is not changing. That is still improving the design standards for the major private street to be aligned with the rest of the private street standards.
mhm,
Next, Add the following on page 10-29. I will just read the last sentence on this one because that's going to have the change based on the planning board comments. This exemption does not apply if the shipping container is used primarily for storage.
Mhm.
Yeah, and all we did there was clean up the language a little bit. That's fine.
Just for Sarah, for your benefit, there's a requirement there's very specific requirements in the land use ordinance that shipping containers can't be left for a certain length of time, et cetera. But we've had people apply to like make a shipping container into a coffee shop, for example. And then we've got to work around the ordinance. Well, it's not being used as a shipping container, but this is just to clarify that that they could be, a shipping container is just a box that could be repurposed for other things, as long as it's not goes back and being used as a shipping container.
Makes sense.
All right. Next, amend the following starting on page 10-29 for section 10.24. So this probably had the most changes since last meeting. So I spoke with Ralph's Home at the top of the hill, and they said that the smallest unit they sell is 780 square feet. That's the smallest unit they have on stock. They have gone smaller by special order, but the smallest they've ever sold was 672 square feet. So in terms of how our ordinance is currently written, because someone made the case, oh, well, Ralph's Home sells under 750 square feet mobile homes. That seems a bit embarrassing. But according to Ralph's Home directly, they actually sell over 750 square feet unless someone goes out of their way to get a smaller home. And in terms of price, they said it doesn't really make that much of a difference whether it's 672 square foot or 780. The price is still going to be roughly the same. So based on that, last meeting, I know there was a discussion about, well, I think, Jim, you had the metaphor, we were a dog chasing its own tail or something.
Sounds like me. I don't remember saying it, but it sounds like something I say.
So with this new revelation, I don't know if the board still wants to go forward with potentially reducing the square foot size for a living space, or if you want to keep it the same.
Well, I think in this case, it'd be important to go back to why there's a number there in the first place. I mean, setbacks are understandable because a setback creates, there's a visual issue and a neighborhood issue for people going by if you're putting your house right on the street, for example, or right next to an abutter, and so your neighbor has something right next to them. So that's why there are setback requirements and acreage requirements. So what's the purpose of the minimum square foot requirement?
The minimum square footage for the manufactured home is a state law.
And what's the state law now?
750 square feet.
I don't see
So-
why we want to change it.
But
So
towns,
if it's this,
can have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, in most cases, the state rules, and we're not allowed to have more restrictive rules than the state, or
Well, in most state laws, and this one included, they always add in a provision where towns can be less restrictive.
less restrictive. Yeah,
So
okay.
in this case, we can allow smaller ones as long as it meets HUD regulations. So it has to have a certification on it saying it's under 750 square feet, but it does meet the U.S. housing and urban development regulations. Like there's actually supposed to be a certification or a bumper sticker or something actually on the mobile home, if that's the case.
Actually, is this a different standard than, say, a stick-built home or a prefab home or? a
It is
mobile home?
different. It is
So it's
different
all
from,
separate, it's its own separate entity.
Right.
And they have that because just the various things that these little houses present.
right. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's just a lot of differences, mostly with the fact that you can actually move the mobile home itself.
I see.
So, for example, I think Warren has its own ordinance regarding manufactured homes, and I think that's 400 square feet is the smallest it could go. Wiscasset has various sizes, and I think don't even require a 14-foot horizontal width. I think they allow 12. So we're following what the state has for rules. Whether we want to be different is completely up to the town. I mean,
And the only reason this even came on our radar is because of the one incident we had up on North Nobleboro. Is that right?
correct with Viola Stone, where she wanted to live in a camper, which was already against what the
Right,
ordinance would have allowed, but they tried to make different methods of expanding it to meet the rules, but I don't think it came anywhere close to 500 feet, actually, square feet. So this was only something that was brought up for that case, which, as an update, I believe it's actually all been settled at this point, and it shall have a long-term solution. But I believe. But this is an item that was brought up where the comments that followed after that incident was Ralph's Homes sells under what you require. Shouldn't that be addressed? But after speaking with Ralph's Homes, they pretty much said, no, we sell what you guys require. There's no issue here.
I think it's a case of it's not broken, let's not fix it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, although I think again, there's a lot of really, the size of a home, with the advent of tiny homes, and there's a lot of, special equipment and materials and products that are now available to allow people to live in very small spaces that can still be quite nice.
Well, the tiny homes would actually still be allowed. It's just under a different specific standard now.
Yes. So maybe we can circle, when we talk about the tiny home standard, we can circle back maybe and talk about this, because I think if I recall correctly, there's a gap between the tiny homes and the manufactured homes. So okay.
So with all that said, if we're not changing it, the only actual change I would make to this section would be at 10.24.5 travel trailers, where the beginning sentence would say a travel trailer shall in no case be used as a manufactured home, and then the newest language, or tiny home. Because that's, again, state law, where tiny homes aren't supposed to be considered a camper trailer.
Right, a travel trailer is not intended to be a permanent home.
Right.
By our standards. Okay.
And then 10 point, oh no, was someone,
I didn't get that sentence. A travel trailer shall in no case be used as a what or a tiny home?
as a manufactured home or tiny home.
Thank you.
And then,
Where is that on page 3?
yes,
4.5, it's about 3 lines down on this document.
I have it at the very bottom of page 3.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's been approved. So you're saying you're approving that?
no, if if we're not making any changes to the square footage for a manufactured home, then that would be the only proposed change that we would have go to the ordinance.
And Susan, you're right. I think we're all in agreement that that's the
Language.
language we like to see. Yes.
Does the sentence continue and any travel trailer and uses temporary
Yep.
dwelling, et cetera?
Yep.
Is the rest of that sentence included?
The rest of the sentence is included. I only just stopped at or tiny home because that's the only amendment.
The only change, okay, accepted, thank you.
So going on to the next item. So tiny homes would be its own specific standard or section. I only labeled it as section 10.35 for now, but we could certainly renumber everything to have it closer to the manufactured homes. And really, this doesn't change any of the language that I had last meeting, other than just changing the numbering, 10.35.1, 10.35.2, and so on. I believe that gets us back to where we were last time with renewable energies. So,
Max, I'm sorry, Max, before we go there.
Yep.
So what, is there a definition somewhere of a tiny home versus a travel trailer?
I did not include that.
There's some references as to what a tiny home is, but it's got to comply with American National Standards Institute standard, yada, yada, yada. I don't know if those are any different than what travel trailers need to comply with.
Tiny home is defined. Yeah, tiny home is defined through the state language, so I will have to pull that out. And I think the only reason I didn't include it this time was because I just made a note saying that I would include definitions from all these amendments. So I will get the definition for a tiny home next time we talk about these items.
So that's fine. So long as it is defined somewhere, that's all it really.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
It is defined by the state.
yeah, I would, if you can send that out to everybody in the meantime, before we talk about it next, that would be great. Because it could reflect on the manufactured homes as well, so.
Okay. So what I'll do, similar to what we did last time, do you want me to read each of these new items that were brought in for renewable energy structures, like read it word for word, or am I giving the board members a minute to read?
I would like a minute. I think reading is faster than,
You doing it?
speaking. Yeah, just.
Okay. I'll give everyone a minute. While I check comments.
So this is basically a number of items related to requiring renewable energy application to include decommissioning plan, then having a performance guarantee,
Correct.
and then a timeline for construction and maintenance phases, which includes vehicle traffic.
And this was based on just the experience we've had with the last two applicants.
Mhm.
solar applicants, although this would apply to any renewable energy project. Main reason is simply people would have appreciated when some construction was happening for the Sunrays solar project. And the bond and the performance guarantees are items that should be in place for any type of project of this scale, just that type of guarantee that there will be some cleanup done. Similar to what we have over at the Sylvania site right now with Leadvance, they put in a bond, and so if there's any mess that's related to how Sylvania operated, the town's not paying for it. It's that little bond that Leadvance put to the US EPA. Same thing with this. If the solar or whatever company came to apply, if they happen to go under, there's still going to be money that they put aside that either the new owner or the town could use to help clean up the site.
Mhm.
So Max, when it says 150% of the applicant's budgetary item, that's predetermined of what they think it's going to cost to remediate it, and then it's 1.5 times that amount,
Correct.
and that money goes what, in escrow or somewhere?
Yeah, I think what was required for St. Cartford was it could have gone to an escrow or a bond.
A bond, I see. And if they don't comply, they forfeit that.
If they don't comply, they forfeit that as said in 10.35.2.1.
Okay.
So this whole section, and for Sarah's benefit, this is some of the difficult work we do as the board is modify the land use ordinance. It's not the most fun part of our job. The applications are much more interesting, but we find that we end up with application. The land use ordinance is a large and if you've gotten a copy of it already, a cumbersome document, and it's slow moving because it takes the whole town to vote any changes in it. So it's a slow moving document. So we find that things like storage containers or event centers, or in this case, solar farms, aren't necessarily sufficiently within the land use ordinance. And so we have to work around it. But then we said, well, boy, we better fix the land use ordinance. So that's what a lot of these things are related to that we are now struggling through. So,
All right.
Great. Well, that section looks fine to me, Max.
I have one or two quick suggestions, and I need to bolt.
Yeah.
On 1035, 1.5, budget outline of costs for removing the structures and restoring the area to pre-project conditions. That needs to be stated in future dollars. So it's going to be decommissioned in 2050. It needs to be escalated. You get a current estimate of $10,000, but by the time you get to 2050, it's $25,000. So it needs to be escalated to the time at which decommissioning is planned. And it also needs to be mutually agreed with the town. I mean, they can come in with a lowball estimate of a few $1,000s, and we know it's going to take 20. So, or more. So there needs to be some counter approval by the town involved as well, that we don't just accept what's been presented.
Well, this is what isn't this what they have to submit? This isn't what necessarily we would approve as a board, correct?
No, this is for the town. We do not as the planning board. This is an agreement with the town of Waldeboro, either with the town manager or the selectmen.
Well, the decommissioning plan is it says it's to the Waldeboro Planning Board.
Yeah, and I was going to say the decommissioning plan would be something that the board would review and the board would approve, not the select board and the town manager. You can specify who you would want done, but the intent for this was everything would go through the planning board rather than the select board instead.
Yeah.
But the performance guarantee has to be made out to someone. And in this case, it would be made out to the town of Waldeboro, not to the planning board. Right?
Correct, the performance guarantee, yes. Yeah.
And to me, that means that the town needs to be more involved than just us. We
Yeah,
should be the first line of defense, if you will, for the town, but not necessarily the final. Because the town is the one that's going to be accepting it, and in the long run has the obligation to enforce it.
right, because in the next section, it's, you know, the town of Waldeboro has the right to retain the funding, so, yeah. So that needs to be cleaned up a little bit, I agree. Was the purpose of the 150% to account for inflation over the life of the,
The bonds are already supposed to take into account the inflation. The 150 was to give some buffer, yes.
so the budget, so Jim's point is correct then, though, that the cost should be, should be future dollar cost plus the 150, plus the 50%.
What's the 50%? Because estimates are always low. Yep.
Yeah.
When was the last time you built a house, Scott? Or did a remodel?
All right. So we'll find that, and I'll also look at some other decommissioning plans that have been done as well, because I'm talking to everyone about private roads. So I'll ask about decommissioning plans and performance guarantees and see how that duty was designated in the town.
And I think Jim makes a good point. Who actually does the estimate? I mean, I wouldn't know what a decommissioning plant 30 years down the road would cost. I mean, who comes to the pricing? Who comes to the estimate that they submit or you have to agree upon?
Guys, you'll excuse me, I'm getting calls to be
Okay.
someplace else. So
That's all right.
Okay,
we'll see
Thanks,
you
Jim.
next month. Sarah, welcome.
okay.
Bye.
Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Yeah.
Usually it would
Well,
be
go ahead,
I was
Max.
gonna say, usually it's the solar company themselves or the applicant themselves. They have an accountant who does get the
Who would
estimates
do
for
that?
that. Yeah.
But to Jim's point, could they lowball it? And then, you know, like I said, I wouldn't have the expertise to vote on something like that. I wouldn't feel
Right.
comfortable. I don't know if I'm making too much out of this, but you know, they're not gonna go way higher, would you think? And then who's to say what happens 10, 20, 30 years down the road?
Well, I think there's enough, if they present a clear enough budget, I mean, there's a limited number of activities that would be associated with taking those things away.
Right.
That, it's some disassembly and, shipping. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, trucking and heavy equipment work. So it's not an irrational thing to be able to rough out whether it's rational or not. You've got the 150%, window there. But I think we'll have to think about that because it's a good point. But I think for the moment, at least, I think it would be important that the budget is submitted to the town and the planning board both,
Right.
and that it include the future cost, and that the performance bond would be presented to the town.
All right. I will look around and see just on the performance guarantee if that's usually a planning board item or if that's just sent to the town manager or select board.
Yep.
And I'll also see what's done for how the amount is determined.
And the only reason I say that, Max, if I may interject,
Mhm.
is because I've been on that Sylvania task force for 4 years. And whatever bond they have, I mean, look how much has changed over the decades. So I don't think they could foresee, there's hydrologists, geographicals, the cement is cracked. I mean, how can you predict that
Mm-hmm.
with any degree of certainty?
Right.
So I think there should be a caveat in there where somebody could actually take a look at that and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we need a check valve here.
Well, could we actually ask for funding for like a third party expert to review the proposal?
I believe that's actually I believe that is actually something in the ordinance already.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's a really good
Point, though.
question.
Yeah, that's a great
That's a
point.
really good question. And I think the other thing is this part of it, keep in mind, this budget, they're not just presenting it, we're accepting it. So if we have questions about it, or it doesn't seem right, we can add more, more steps that they would have to go through in terms of provisions that the applicant would have to submit before we approve it. So we do have that. We always have that to provide some conditions on an approval.
Here we go. Yes, on page 3-2, this is the paragraph right before section 3.3 general requirements. The planning board may require the applicant to perform additional studies, submit additional materials, or hire a consultant to review the application or portions thereof. The cost of additional studies, additional materials, or consultant shall be borne by the applicant.
Good.
So if we did have some large and cumbrous plan that we couldn't feel we were qualified to process, we could go that way. And that provision isn't just for the solar thing, that's a general.
That's for any planning board item.
Okay.
For any applicant.
So in reasonable circumstances, if you do believe someone is lowballing in this case, you could say, can you hire a third-party consultant to confirm that number?
Okay. That's a good point.
And
Right.
they can either say, yeah, sure, it's minimal compared to the cost we have, or they'll say, we're a small change of use and you want us to now spend tens of thousands of dollars on a consultant. No. So,
Yes.
but I'll ask around for those two items on town involvement and verifying the bond to see what other towns do.
Okay.
And then definitions, that's something that I have to get to, pretty much including anything that wasn't included in the last round of amendments and all the new items such as the tiny homes. So now these are the three newest items I wanted to talk about. The first is for shoreland zoning, everyone's favorite. I reached out to the Maine Department of Environmental Protection to see if there were any new rules since Chapter 1000. Chapter 1000 is what the town incorporated in the land use ordinance back in 2018. So all I was told from Colin Clark was there was one item, 38 MRSA section 439-A10. This is the only item, and this is roughly word for word what's required. An applicant must provide the municipal permitting authority pre-construction photographs and no later than 20 days after completion of the development, post-construction photographs of the shoreline vegetation and development site. I was thinking of putting this under the conditions section, making it 11.7.7.1. And that's really it. So if someone comes to and wants to build a home in the shoreland zone, it wouldn't come to the planning board, but Stan Waltz would give them the building permit, and then that person would have to come back 20 days once the construction is done and show the new home and what the home was built on, essentially. And in the planning board's case, same thing. If there was some construction or some trees being cut in the resource protection, similar to the solar farm on Travis Reed's property, the Sunrays one, that was done in the shoreland as well. So we would have just received some copies of where the trees were being cut. And that's really it. There's nothing more to it.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a good thing to have.
Then the next item I wanted to talk about was the schedule of dimensions requirements. And I'll probably be quick about this one. So in our ordinance,
let me pull up the actual thing so I'm getting it right. On page 6-18, this is section 6.8, schedule of dimensional requirements. What I am suggesting is possibly making some of these items a bit more in sync with each other. For example, Route 1 Commercial A and Route 1 Commercial B. In Route 1 Commercial B, if you're hooked up to water, sewer, or both, you can have as small as a 5,000 square foot lot size. Whereas in Commercial A, regardless of whether you're on sewer and water, you have to have 2 acres minimum or 80,000 square feet. At the bottom of the hill here, Tucker Chevrolet is Route 1 Commercial A, whereas across the street from them, that's Route 1 Commercial B. So the Family Dollar store can theoretically be a 5,000 square foot lot, but the Tucker Chevrolet right across the street has to be 2 acres, even if they're both on sewer and water. So I don't know if this is a matter of amending the dimensional requirements so that Route 1 Commercial A could have that same standard where they can have smaller lot sizes, maybe not 5,000 square feet. It could be sort of half that, so, or not half that, double it.
Is it, Max, because those stores like US Cellular, it lends itself to a smaller area, whereas a car dealership needs the spaces? Was there any rhyme or reason for that, or how'd that come about?
I do not know. I honestly
It just
don't.
seems very odd that if you just
I mean,
across the street, it's a whole different thing.
right. I mean, all this was done in 2005. I think the Family Dollar store that was built, that wasn't built until this past decade, I assume.
Right.
So it might have been people imagined a lot more things were going to happen on the Family Dollar store because that's where a lot of the village/residential areas were. That might be the reason why. But I'm not expecting like an answer or anything. I was just getting more guidance from the planning board members of whether this is something to consider.
Is there an interested party in the adjustment for the 1A side?
I have been asked by some people who have done work on the Route 1 areas, mostly Route 1 Commercial A. There was one individual who wanted to make an extension, and he was already within 100 feet of the Route 1 Commercial A area. But the size of the lot wouldn't have allowed it. And if he did build back, it would have been 20 feet from the line, but that's not allowed. He would have to be 30 feet from the line. And then I was reached by, I think it was around the coffee can, at the time the coffee can came around. That was another case of, can the town reduce the 100-foot setback, because that puts us way back at the back of the property at this point. Or as everyone saw it, they wanted to be a lot closer to the road, to be on the other side of the tree, be a bit more, everyone likes to be a bit more visible. That's part of the thing when it comes to the setbacks.
I think I'm just not following the connection between that and like the discussion of lot size, and maybe that's because I didn't read, or maybe, okay, I see this is like addressing a number of things. So
Yeah, dimensional
one of them
requirements.
is lot. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I probably actually should have been a bit more clear on that. The dimensional requirements, it is a broad topic. It does talk about lot sizes, road frontage, shore frontage, although shore frontage isn't even part of the discussion at this point because it's all 200 feet across the board. But road setbacks and side setbacks, and then maximum lot coverage and building height, all of that falls under the schedule of dimensional requirements.
Okay.
So if I'm getting this, let me just sort of circle back here. So as an example here, you're talking about, so Route 1, sort of on either side of Route 32, north and south of Route 32 along Route 1 is commercial B.
A.
Is commercial, no.
If I'm at the intersection and Dunkin' Donuts is in front of me, well, no, Dunkin' Donuts not. Tucker Chevrolet. So if I'm driving down Route 1 and I'm heading to Damascotta, the moment I get to Tucker Chevrolet, the right side is Route 1A. The left side is Route 1B.
Yeah, but right, but before you get to Tucker on the right side is also commercial B.
At the Dunkin' Donuts,
I'm
yes.
looking at the map. I'm just saying that.
Oh no, I'm working off the top of my head, so you might
Okay.
be. You're
I'm
probably
just
right on
saying,
it.
but you're right. I was trying to make the same point you just said I want to make sure I understand that the issue is, like, for example, if you're going south on Route 1, on the left-hand side by the dollar store, very small lot sizes are allowed. And on the right-hand side, going up the hill past Tucker Chevrolet, small lots are not allowed. You have to have really large lots.
Right.
And does that make any sense? I could posit, I don't think it does make a whole lot of sense. I don't know why it's like that. It would be interesting to understand why it is. Similarly, if you go north on Route 1 past Moody's, it turns to commercial route,
1A.
commercial A, which is larger lot size requirements. So it's a very legitimate question where you draw the line, and why. For example, if you just say, okay, every time dense development gets close to a border between one zone and another, we just broaden that zone, is not necessarily the way you want to do development. But if I mean, it's a reasonable argument that I would be in favor of, which is, I think you want a lot of your development, if you want to encourage business and have development, I think you want to put it in one area and not put it in a rural area. So, but I think this is something really worth scoping out in terms of what the town wants. You were going to say something, Johnny?
Well, I was just going to say, to your point, Scott, that's really a huge question. I mean, if you determine the zoning, how the town evolves or unwinds,
Mhm.
I mean, could you get in a Walmart down there? Or, I think that's a huge question. And to see I don't know how you address it with the input you get from the town folks and so forth, of what kind of town they really want, because I think that's the bigger picture I'm seeing.
So yeah, with that, I think I'd take us. I mean, this is I like the way you've written this note, sort of laying this out. But I think the way to look at this is from the 20,000 foot level of, and we just maybe go back to what sections of the comprehensive plan. Sarah, you may not be aware, or you may. The town went through a few years ago and finished up a comprehensive plan where there were a lot of people in town involved in, sort of planning the future of Waldoboro and what things were important to us. I think relative to this part of it, maybe that's a place to start, because I think this is a broad subject rather than getting into the weeds of where should we draw the line or move one of the zoning lines between A and B, is take the big picture look at what the broad thoughts of the town were towards, the location of development. Because if it was, I think, I don't know, I don't want to speak, and I don't want to be wrong on this of what I think the comprehensive plan might have said about this, but putting development in certain areas was I think part of it. So
That's fair.
I agree with you, Matt. I think this is a section that ought to be, that we should look at carefully into how we make this clear and understandable and why these are the way they are.
As I said, this was merely me just realizing it. We're already looking at the ordinance. I didn't know if other members had already looked at these dimensional requirements and thought similar things, or if this might be a matter of perhaps just changing that Tucker Chevrolet section and just making that Route 1B, just make that consistent in that area at least. It's definitely not something I was not expecting an answer for today. It was
Yeah.
more of let this stew in your mind for just a meeting or two, and
Okay,
probably a bit down the line. We have plenty of time until June, so there's definitely time to think this over.
What's in June? Sorry.
June is when the town holds its what would the word be? It's when the town holds its town meeting. So like for the budget, school budgets, select board members and everything. So usually whenever I do anything, something this big, I usually like to wait until either the June vote or the November vote, because that's when everyone in town is coming to the town office and they're going to vote on something. That's when we're going to get the higher turnout for participation.
I think just for like a change like this, something I'd want to understand more is like to what extent the town would be on the hook for any like infrastructure changes that could result from a change in these requirements. So like if we suddenly are going to have a lot more development, like what is the cost to the town of making sure that there is like sewer and electric and all that stuff available?
yep. Good point.
So,
Okay, more follow-up, Max.
all right, I'll look into that. So then the last item, mass gatherings. So this is a general performance standard that has always been a bit odd in my book. And now we have official event centers as a category. So again, this was similar to dimension requirements. We're already going through the ordinance. I didn't know if planning board members had any thoughts or feelings on this, but I almost wonder if mass gatherings could be kept out of the ordinance and its own separate permit section, similar to a building permit or a plumbing permit, or if it should just be combined under the event centers, where it has like its own little subsection for where we just move all the requirements under maybe it's specific standards, but just under event centers in general. But I wasn't really married to any idea for the mass gatherings.
Max, so when you say event centers, what do you mean, gatherings of like
So like
concerts or?
so like what Cider Hill is or Topsail Farm,
Right,
where like a minor one would be it's not the main use of the site, like Topsail Farm, it's
Right.
a campground, but they do occasionally hold these bigger gatherings. Same thing with Cider Hill. They are recreation focused, but you might be able to hold like Oktoberfest there.
I would just add, being in the health field for 35 years and being intimately involved in the whole COVID thing, you may want to kind of hold back on that to see how it unfolds this fall and winter.
Well, the event centers are already in the ordinance. They're already allowed.
They can do, yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no type of masking or anything like the ordinance or mandates or nothing
No.
of that nature has been.
No,
Okay. The
event centers are more similar to what the planning board always does.
Sure.
It's someone coming here and saying, what I want to do by next year is build this place and it has this event center. Because in the past, it's always been this odd area for what we do for someone like Cider Hill or Topsail Farm, who do want to do these big gatherings, but we didn't have anything specifically. Like I think with Topsail Farm, Scott can correct me on this one. I'm pretty sure what we did is they have like a limit of the number of mass gatherings they do a year, and they have
Right.
to file one with the town. That's not something we
Right.
should have anyone do, really. But,
Correct. Well, but I think when we added event centers as a category, I think that makes sense because it is a business model and
Right.
places can have a business that's an event center. So we need a category for it in a way to cover approving it or not,
Mhm.
depending on the requirements. I think there is a distinction in that a mass gathering, because someone could just, decide to have an event on their property that could potentially involve a lot of people. And it's good to alert the town because the fire chief wants to know and will be able to get to the property if there's an emergency, blah, blah, blah. So there is the need to have a separate mass gathering permit process, but that's code enforcement officer, right? Max, it's not part of the planning board.
it's
Correct?
not in the land use matrix. That's the thing.
It's
like-
what?
It's not in the land use matrix. That's the issue.
The mass gathering permit?
Mass gatherings, yeah. So
Right.
I could certainly put in the specific standards that it's a mass gathering permit and it's not gonna fall under the land use matrix. Or I could put in the matrix, land use matrix, and just leave it as is. Again, this is probably just me being very nitpicky on it.
Right.
Well-
It's always been this odd item. But I do want to have it addressed.
I think event centers ought to have a I think it's reasonable to have mass gathering permit requirements for event centers. You're saying no?
Well, if the purpose of a place is an event center, though, like we don't want someone to have to file a permit like every time they're gonna hold a
Right.
wedding.
Right, and that
So-
was the intent.
Yeah.
Mass gathering. Go ahead.
Just how many people is a mass gathering? Is there a definition?
If they anticipate 100 people. So, for example, the fire chief had to do one because this Saturday, the town is hosting the firemen's conference, I believe. And there's going to be parade. And so we're anticipating at least 100 people are going to participate, whether it's firefighters throughout the state or people in Waldeboro. But if the fire department was doing it every weekend, we'd want to make them probably get an actual event center and coming to the planning board saying, we're doing this every time, this and this and that.
Mhm.
But the mass gathering is supposed to be more of the one-off special events for something like that, really.
So
Okay.
maybe there should be language around like how many of these you can have in what period before you need to become an event center.
I think that's the right way to swing it.
Okay.
But I look at them, an event center is a place and it's a recurring activities, and the mass gathering permit process through the code, the CEO through the town is for one-offs or things like that.
Yep.
And they can be totally independent from each other, right?
Yep, I agree. And I do agree to Sarah's point that perhaps that might be the thing that I just need to get addressed. Where if someone, I guess I want to avoid the situation where someone just keeps getting a mass gathering permit because they know they wouldn't be allowed to operate where they are.
Right.
Like, So I guess that,
I had my daughter's wedding at my house and it went great, and I decided I'm just gonna have some more of and rent out to other people to start having weddings every couple weeks and put in mass gathering permits. To Sarah's point, then that becomes a business that needs approval through the planning board.
Yep.
Question is at how many, where's the limit, or how do you draw that line as to when you're gonna require people that it becomes a business? And
that's what the board can find out.
Yeah. Good.
Well, we won't get that tonight since there's 3 voting members, it's 25 till, and I assume, and I just want to quickly talk about the checklist and then
Okay,
hopefully that'll be done in 5 minutes.
really?
Hopefully, because
Okay,
we did go over the checklist quite a while ago.
yes.
I guess I just wanted to know if any members had any thoughts about what exactly is in there, or if there's any amendments that need to be done to it, because really what would happen is I give a copy to the applicants, I use a copy to review their application, and then the board can keep their own copy, whether you want a paper copy or if you want to just use an amendable PDF form. You just simply acknowledge where someone would be applicable or had a waiver request. For example, historic village district architectural standards, you're likely always going to say that's a waiver anyways. But I would use the middle section just to say, this is where you'll find that item, where they address it. And then planning board decision would be up to the planning board, where it's just more of a formal item. Whenever you believe an application is done and you're getting to the motion, you just quickly do a rundown of the items, say section 7.1, they say this. Any issues from the board? None, good. Construction standards, good, and just go on that way. And then by the time you finish it all, the board would determine whether it is complete and then motion to approve the application.
So have you started, my recollection from looking at it last time, I thought it was fine, but I mean, are you using this now? Have you started?
I used this back in, I think, March when, who was it? Collins Auto. No, I think I used this in January with the Sincarfa application, now that I'm thinking about it. But I used it for my own personal use at the time.
Yeah.
I only now added in the planning board decision items, because when it's complete, I want the planning board to use it to always keep track of it.
Okay, so and you found it helpful for that purpose then?
I have found it helpful because when I'm putting my summary together and I'm going through all these articles and whatnot, whether someone requested a waiver, I give the checklist to them. I think Collins Auto is the one who actually used this as part of their application.
Okay.
They said where waivers were requested, and they could always put down where they put it in their application. And for me, I just follow suit with that, and then the board pretty much just has to look at the first 2 columns.
So, well, my gut reaction is that the best way for us to review this and figure out whether we want to make any changes and how valuable it is for you is to start using it, so that if you fill this out and submit it with the application documents, that would be so then we would have it already, filled out or reviewed by you, that we could see how that works as a tool for us. Would be the best way to evaluate it, is to start using it.
That's good.
Let's beta test it.
Okay. I could also use a former application if we want, in case we don't have anyone next month. I can just get an old application and just have it use this form. I could pull up the Collins Auto one because they already used it and just use that as an example.
Well, except is your purpose then to try to evaluate the document? But if you've used it, I'm going to trust your judgment that it's satisfactory to you, that rather than go back over an old one, that the next application comes up that you use this form for, you submit it with the documents, and we'll learn by doing as we go forward.
I misinterpreted that whole thing. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Does that make sense, or would you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Next applicant, I'll have them go through the checklist.
Okay.
I'll have them use the checklist.
Yeah, learn by doing is the key, I think. You gotta just
All my
Use it.
life, learned by failing, but that's another.
But that's all I have now.
Okay,
And look at that. I did do that in 5 minutes.
All right.
wow, great.
I'm ready, Don.
So,
Minutes will have to be deferred to next meeting.
right, and relative to this, the land ordinance, this amendment suggestions, you've got to put out another version of that anyway, Max?
Mhm.
Is that correct? So you could send that and Susan would have a chance to look through that and do any other editorial suggestions she might have.
What is this that you're talking about that you want me to look at?
The land use ordinance amendment suggestions you were asking about, about providing some more editorial comments on it. And Max has to put on another version of that anyway, so you'll get a copy of it so you can do that.
Very good. So Max is going to send me that before the next meeting, and you'd like my input before the next meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I would like. Is that okay, Max?
Yep.
Great.
At this time, I don't believe I have any applications for next month.
Wow, okay.
Wow.
We were rolling there for a while.
I don't know what to say.
Hopefully they will pick up again.
Maybe it's due to COVID.
COVID.
I don't think it's that. I think I don't know. I think we've just been busy for so long that I don't know. Maybe it's something to do with Sarah. I think Sarah has something to do with it. The moment we complaints, we had that one trucking terminal pre-application, and then they just didn't show up.
Okay, great.
But I do still need to get signatures for some applications.
Okay,
And I feel there's a board member who didn't sign a lot of old applications that I need to get theirs. So I'm going to try and hunt down who that person is.
not me. It's probably me.
It might be you, Scott. Now
Yes. Well, I came in and signed a bunch a while back, but
I just have to verify whose signatures are who pretty
Okay.
much.
okay. Well, let me know soon because if you brought them here, I've just been pretty flat out, and I'm actually going to be away 3 days next week as well. So,
I'll try and coordinate a time
You know.
to get those.
great. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, anything else we need to discuss tonight? If not, I would like a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion made and seconded to adjourn. There being no debate on the motion to adjourn, all in favor of the motion signify aye. Johnny?
Aye.
Sarah? You have to say
Aye.
something, I think now.
Aye.
Zoom protocols for voting. I also say aye. So we are adjourned. Please, everyone, stay well and healthy and see you next